You don't need to speak on physical stages to be a speaker. You might think, but how can I be a speaker if I'm not actually on a stage speaking to people? Well, what do you think that all the speakers have been doing during this period of COVID? Do you think that they've just disappeared from existence? No! They adapted and moved their message into the virtual space. COVID has marked the beginning of a new wave of technology and communication. And if you don't jump on this wave now, you're going to get left behind. Back in 2019, before any of us had ever heard of COVID, I ran my first ever multi-day event, the Weekend Author Your Life Summit. This was a year of prep and marketing. And by the time that I delivered the final event, I had basically broken even. And that was just breaking even in terms of the income and money. I'm not talking about breaking even in terms of all the time and energy and effort that essentially got invested into a year-long project. Shortly after COVID hit and we all went into lockdown, I ran a couple of hour webinar, Get Zappy with Zoom, teaching people some of the skills that they could use to communicate on Zoom more effectively. I made a couple $100 off of that webinar. Now, this isn't just to put things into cold, hard and clinical money. It's not that running that multi-day event wasn't hugely impactful and meaningful, but it just illustrates the distinction between physical stage speaking and virtual stage speaking. There are lots of advantages to speaking on the virtual stage, and I want to share 3 of them with you here today. The first advantage of virtual speaking is it presents a much lower barrier to entry. If you're an aspiring speaker and you can maybe remember when you first tried to get into speaking, do you remember how difficult it was? When you are relying on the physical stage alone, you're looking for someone to give you a chat. You need an event organizer, you need a resources manager, you need someone who's going to hire you for a gig, who's going to plant you on a stage in front of an audience. Alternatively, you have to rock the free gig circuit, and you have to do the bars, you have to do the community centers, and this is a good way to get yourself in the game, but ultimately, you're never going to make anything in terms of your speaking career if you're just doing the free gig circuit. The third alternative is you take matters into your own hands and you start running your own events. And that's actually the way that I started out, because I couldn't get past the gatekeepers who'd give me that paid gig. The free gig thing was nice, but there wasn't really much that you could get out of it after a certain point. So I started running my own events, but you've got a whole different kettle of fish there. You've got to pay for the room hire, you've got to get bums on seats, you've got to put in work into the marketing. It all relies on you to run the entire event. You're doing the hospitality, you're doing the health and safety, as well as trying to hone your craft as a speaker. So whichever method you're going for to get into the physical speaking game, it's hard. Virtual speaking, on the other hand, anyone can launch into it. If you have a camera and an internet connection, you can start virtual speaking. You can get onto Facebook Live, you can start creating YouTube videos, you can run webinars, you can do all sorts of things, all from the comfort of your own home. You can get invited onto podcasts, you can speak at virtual summits. It's a much lower barrier to entry, and you don't have the same gatekeepers and obstacles and considerations that are stopping you or stunting you at the beginning of your speaking journey. The second advantage is how much virtual speaking saves. Virtual speaking saves time. You don't have to get on a train for 3 hours to travel to where you're speaking, to deliver a 1-hour keynote, and then get the 3-hour train back. That's something that I have done multiple times. It saves money. Yes, you usually get your travel expenses paid when someone hires you, but there's all other sorts of expenses involved in being a physical public speaker. You have to pay for liability insurance. If you're running your own events, as I was talking about earlier, you have to hire rooms and pay for marketing. There's a lot of financial cost that goes into being a physical speaker that you don't get with virtual speaking. And I think if we're taking this a step further and we're really going on to a higher moral calling, virtual speaking saves the environment. Think about all the travel that the speaking industry was doing pre-COVID. The trains, the cars, the planes. Do you really need to fly to Dubai in order to share some marketing techniques with people in Dubai? Do you really need to get on that train down to London to share some nutrition tips with people in London? You don't. Yes, there are definitely advantages to being in the same room with people, and there's a level of connection and rapport that will never fully be replicated in the virtual space. But that doesn't mean that you can't replicate it at all. Through virtual speaking, we can stay in our own homes and we can still project a message and people can still learn without all of that environmental damage that all of that travel was causing. I'm going to be sharing tip number 3 with you in just a minute, but first, let me tell you about our Facebook group, Rise and Inspire Speakers. Our Facebook group, Rise and Inspire Speakers, provides you with a safe, supportive community to develop the skills to get your message out into the world. We host a virtual summit, Inspire Week, within the group every month where you can sign up for a 30-minute slot to speak live in the group. This is a free opportunity you can sign up for month after month to practice your skills, try new things, and refine aspects of your story and message. There is a ton of educational content that gets pumped into this group. You can access ongoing educational resources that help you gain more confidence on camera, create more compelling speech content, and develop a deeper connection with your ideal audiences. Speaking of connection, the members of our community are fantastic. They are like-minded people who, just like you, want to make a difference in the world and will cheer you on and encourage you every step of the way. If you want to master your virtual speaking skills, then this is the place to be. Advantage number 3 of virtual speaking is that you actually reach more people. I was literally running a masterclass earlier this week, and we must have had about 20 countries on that masterclass. There was Canada, there was the United States, there was Scotland, there was Sweden, there was Germany, there was Kenya, there was Thailand. How could I possibly reach people in all of those countries as a physical speaker? Flying across to North America, flying across to continental Europe, flying across to Asia. I would never be able to speak to all those people in the same capacity as I was able to on a single virtual masterclass. That is where the real magic of virtual speaking comes in. It exponentially increases the scope of people that you can reach with your message. I hope I've convinced you that virtual speaking is a fantastic opportunity and it's going to change the game. Right now, we're in a state of adaptation and adoption. COVID has really kind of thrown a spanner in the works with so much of this, and it's really taking some time to adjust. There aren't any people who are really standing out and getting ahead of the game just now. But there will soon. We're entering a new wave of technology and communication. And if you jump on now, you are going to be cruising for the next decade. If you don't, you are going to be paddling against the current, trying to keep up. What's your choice going to be? Do you want to be cruising, or do you want to be floundering?